Okay, so good evening and welcome to lesson 3 of Booksmart, the Talmud. I guess every Jew heard of the Talmud. It's a very famous word, but sometimes we have the wrong impression. We get the wrong impression of what the Talmud is and what the Talmud isn't. So today we're going to try to, number one, discuss what the Talmud is, what it isn't, the history of the Talmud, the method the Talmud uses in order to, the style of study that the Talmud uses. And I think most excitingly, we're going to actually study Talmud. We're going to delve into one or maybe two, if we have time, as we call it, sugyas, subjects of the Talmud, and we'll see how the Talmud's logic works. One primary type of Talmud that most people would be probably aware of or familiar with is called pilpul. Pilpul. You ever heard the word pilpul? I think it comes from the word pepper or something. Pilpul is a debate or back and forth style of learning. And if you ever go to yeshiva and they're studying Talmud, they'll say, von ein Seite, up, von the andere Seite, up, from one side, the other side. Yeah. Pilpul? Probably Aramaic.
Sounds Yiddish.
Is machlokes, right? So it's back and forth. It's a debate style, and it's arguments, counter arguments, proofs, counter proofs. They tell a story. This one is one of the most famous Jewish jokes is of this guy comes to a rabbi and says, "Rabbi, and all my Jewish friends talk about the Talmud. They love studying the Talmud. I want to study the Talmud." And the rabbi says, "You can't study the Talmud. It's a special style of study, and you won't get it. Just test me." He says, "Okay." He says, "You have two people coming down the chimney. They want to steal. They're sneaking into a house to steal. They come down the chimney. One has a dirty face, and one comes out with a clean face. Who washes his face?" The guy says, "Well, you have the dirty face." So the rabbi says, "No, you're not ready for Talmud." He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Listen, the guy with the clean face the guy with the dirty face is going to look at his friend who has a clean face. So he's not going to wash his face. The guy with the clean face is going to look at his friend who has a dirty face, think he has a dirty face, and wash his face." So the guy says, "Okay, now I got it. Rabbi, ask me another question." So, okay, two thieves go down a chimney. One comes out with a clean face, one with a dirty face. Who washes his face? And he says, "Well, it's the one with the clean face." The rabbi says, "No, you don't get it. How do two people come down the chimney, the same chimney, and one has a clean face, one has a dirty face?" He says, "Okay, now I got it, Rabbi. Now I got it. One more question." He says, "Okay, two thieves come down the chimney, one has a clean face, one has a dirty face. Who cleans their faces?" "I know, both of them. They both have dirty faces. They both clean their face." The Rabbi says, "What are you talking about? Thieves are coming down a chimney. They're worried about washing their face. They want to just run away." So it's a sort of joke, but if you learn Talmud, sometimes your head starts exploding that way. That you got to really, my teacher would always say in Yiddish, "Mit a halten Kopf." You gotta hold your head. You gotta really, you use your head, but more than that is you have to your head has to be involved. You can't just sit and listen to Talmud. You have to think, and you have to remember what the first guy said, because it's all going to come around. All the arguments and counter arguments, if you lose like one part of the Talmud in the middle, you lose your train of thought, you dream off, you daydream, and then you just lost the whole thing because you lost the train of thought and you lost the main, it's all a thread that comes together. We'll see later on in the class what I mean. But it can dray a cup in a good way. Okay, so we're going to learn today, number one, is what the Talmud is. The Talmud is the most central Jewish book, Jewish work in the oral tradition. Lesson 1, we studied the written Torah, which is the 24 holy books. We call them the scriptures. After that, we started the oral tradition. The oral tradition was passed down throughout those years, and it was then written in the Mishnah and the Talmud. Now, if you look at this book here, a nice big book, what's this? It's a Talmud. Talmud Bavli, right? It's the Babylonian Talmud. Okay. Is this a Babylonian Talmud? Well, it's one volume of it. There are 63 tractates of the Talmud. This is one volume. It's actually a custom that when a couple gets married, the parents of the bride buy the groom a set of Talmud, hoping that he's going to open it up one day and read it and learn it. But this is the Talmud. Now, this is 163rd. It's one volume of the Talmud. We're actually going to study a little piece from this Talmud. If you open it up, you actually notice this is the actual Talmud. You have a page of Talmud, I think, in your books. Yeah, page 96. 96, you have the page of Talmud. You see that? So the actual Talmud is really in the middle of the page. So if you're looking at the page, just this section in the middle is the Talmud, which is easy to read because it's Hebrew letters. I mean, easy, it doesn't have vowels, it doesn't have punctuation, but it's in the block Hebrew letters. On the inside of the page, so the outside of the page is the Rashi, Rashi's translation, explanation of the Talmud. And on the inside of the page is the Tosafot, which are Rashi's grandchildren and other students that comment on the Talmud. So the Talmud is the middle. It's surrounded, if you look at the next page, you have all the different explanations of what a page of Talmud is. So if you look at the Talmud, there are a lot of stuff going on the right side and the left side and the inside, the outside of the page. Everything's there for a reason. It's some of it's commentary, a lot of it is cross-referencing. So for example, the Talmud now will quote a verse in the Torah. Where's it from? Well, the Talmud assumes you know, because we know the scriptures, right? But to help us out, we have the Gilyon HaShas that tells us where it comes from, Deuteronomy, Numbers in the chapter and verse. On the outside, for example, it says a law. You want to know where can I find this law in the code of Jewish law? So it'll tell us where it's codified in the Shulchan Aruch. There's certain commentaries on the side, very small. But if you open up this book, look at this book, the Talmud actually finishes, the Talmud on the inside, outside, right over here. From here on, the second half, or more than half of the book, are all commentary. And now you know why we Chabadniks all have glasses. They're tiny, and we're going back and forth. And it's not even the block Hebrew letters, it's called Rashi letters. Like this here, this is Rashi script. So in Hebrew, we have three types of lettering. There's the Torah lettering, which is the Talmud, the middle. Then you have the Rashi lettering, which is this script, the Rashi script. And then you have the script that we write, which is a different type of script. So as children, we, first grade, second grade, third grade, we learn all the three scripts. This way we can read Rashi and all the different types of scripts.
So the Gemara is in here as well.
So good. What's the Gemara? What is the difference between Gemara and Talmud? So they seem interchangeable. We're going to learn that today, what the Gemara is. Yeah. Actually, if you look at that, the page of Talmud in your books, you see the new chapter. So it has the large letters in the center, right? It says Hadrin Alecha Yitzias HaShabbos. The next line starts a Mishnah for like 10, 12 lines. Then you see the first words of the 10th line or so, it says Gimel Mem. See that Gimel Mem? After 9 lines of the Mishnah. Okay.
The color changes. Are we? The color.
Yeah, 96. Yeah.
The color changes.
No, the Gemara. There's 2 Gimel Mem. There is the Gemara.
The B and the A are.
So this is the beginning of a new chapter in the Talmud. Mem Adlikin, and that's the Mishnah. And right over here it says Gimel Mem. That's Gemara. Stands for Gemara. Gimel Mem. So Gemara is here. Gimel Mem stands for Gemara. So basically, this is made up of Mishnah and the Gemara. Both together, we call it Talmud. Okay, we'll learn today what the Mishnah is, what the Gemara is, and what the relationship is, and why they're all in one book, and their history.
So the B and the A.
I don't have the letters there. Where's the B and the A?
So,
oh, B and A.
all right.
So B is Gemara, right? A is a Mishnah. A is a Mishnah.
So is the B part
It shouldn't be there.
above?
It shouldn't be there. It should be like 9 lines down, but I guess he couldn't put it in the middle of the wording, so that's what he did.
But the
You see,
red,
the red.
the red,
The red is the Gemara. That means this orange is the Mishnah,
I see.
and the rest of the page is Gemara. Yeah.
And also, is that true on the opposite side, on the D, where it says D, which is the Tosafot?
Tosafot is the commentary on the inside of the page of the
Oh,
Talmud.
I guess I can't.
On the inside of the
That's
page.
not.
And the difference between Rashi and Tosafot is really Rashi explains. It's very hard to learn the Talmud without Rashi. If you open a Steinsaltz or an Art Scroll Talmud, it's basically telling you what Rashi says. Rashi explains Talmud because Talmud's Aramaic. There are no punctuations or question marks or stops or anything. I mean, you goes for pages and pages and pages and pages. See, it's just these 2 pages. There is no stop. It's just one long text. And Rashi then explains in Hebrew, not in Aramaic, but in Hebrew, what the Talmud says, give us a better understanding of the Talmud. The Tosafot, which is in Rashi's grandchildren, Rabbeinu Tam and others, they ask more questions and sort of challenge the Talmud and then try to resolve it.
Talmud is Aramaic.
The word Talmud is Hebrew, but it's in Aramaic. Yeah. Lamed Dalet, right? That's Talmud stands for, right?
Aramaic came first. You confuse us.
1 second. I have to try to reconnect here. Okay. Thank you. We have to fix our Wi-Fi back here. Okay. So let's move on. Let's talk about the Mishnah and the Talmud. So just to give you a little idea of how central Talmud is in Judaism, Jewish learning. If you go to a yeshiva, just walk into a yeshiva, we see people studying, chances are they're studying Talmud. We would study Talmud about 4 hours a day. So for me, we'd wake up, learn Chassidus, we'd daven, then we'd learn for about 3 hours, and then another hour and a half in the afternoon. 4.5 hours a day or so, just Talmud. Every year we would just go through a different tractate, and we would study. Yes, Dennis.
Yeah, that's funny. When there was an earthquake in '94 here in LA, me and my friend Shmuel Lovich, we were studying Talmud until 2 in the morning. We had a test next day. 4 in the morning, there was an earthquake. So we went to sleep at 2, and 4, somebody tried to wake us up, and we still have Talmud in our head. It was
Talmud, right? There you go. Yeah. Studying Talmud all night. That's the truth is, if you go into it, if you ask 2 religious Jews, they meet each other. One will ask the other, "Nu, was lernst du?" In Yiddish. What are you learning? What sugya? What subject in Talmud are you learning now?
Yeah.
You see, in the secular world, what do you study? When do you study? You study as a child. You go to school. You go to college. You study. Then you get a job. No need to study anymore. What are you going to study? I'm not going to study law if I'm not going to be a lawyer. I'm not going to study medicine if I'm not going to be a doctor. I studied. I have a job now. I may read a lot or maybe hobbies, but as study like 5 hours a day or 3 hours a day, intense study for what? If I'm a lawyer or a doctor, maybe I need some credits. I need some, so I'll do it. But in Judaism, regardless of what you are, who you are, what you do for a living, you learn a few hours a day. They would have special shuls, Beit Knesset, synagogues. This was the Taylor synagogue. Tailors would meet at that synagogue. At night, they would learn Talmud. So Talmud was a study that you learned every day, regardless of what you did, where you were in life. It was a lifelong study exercise. I still study Talmud. So today we have the big, every 7-year cycle, right, where they finish the whole Shas, the whole Talmud in 7 years, every day learning a page. and I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds. I don't know how many people actually join it, but it's fascinating, and it's an exercise. It's not, you can't just lay down at bed at night and open a Talmud and read it. I mean, you have to really study it and learn it. But in Judaism, it was so important. The Talmudic study was so important, and we'll soon see why. If we understand what the Talmud is, we'll understand why it was so important to be preserved and be studied by everyone, even children. We study, my Yosef, who is 11 years old now, studies Talmud. It's his first year studying Talmud. So at 10, 11 years old, that's when he start studying Talmud. And it's intense. We learn it at home afterwards, and since he doesn't get it, we have to learn it again and again. And it's very hard for 11-year-olds to start. But by the time the bar mitzvah, 13, 14, that's it. They're studying Talmud on their own. They can already prepare a piece of Talmud. So
is a tractate a chapter, or
no,
is it what exactly?
A tractate is a book, is a subject, a whole subject. So for example, there's one tractate called Shabbat. All the laws of Shabbat are in that tractate.
It's a subject.
Yeah.
We learn Ksubot, Ketubas.
The Ketubas, yeah, Ksubas about marriage. Yeah. The truth is, even those who couldn't study Talmud because it was a little difficult, they would learn what we called Ein Yaakov. Ein Yaakov are the stories, the Agadita we learned last week. The easier parts of the Talmud, they would have special sessions, and they would study every night the Ein Yaakov for half an hour, 45 minutes, and they would learn messages from the stories.
Are any of these translated into English?
Yes.
So could I buy a copy of the Talmud?
Yeah. It's actually a sale now for $2,000. You can buy the whole Talmud in English. But even the English Talmud, you can read the English, but you'd have to get a sort of a introduction on how the Talmud works. Or else it doesn't make sense. We'll actually see at the end of today's lesson, or the second half of the lesson, we're going to learn a whole subject of Talmud, and we'll see it's a whole different mindset. But once you get it, yeah, it's fascinating. Okay. So why does the Talmud take such a central place in Judaism? There are many fields of study in Judaism. There's Medrash, we learned last week. There's the Halacha, we'll learn next week. There's the Chassidut, there's Kabbalah. Why is the central book or work of the oral tradition specifically the Talmud?
Is that the oral tradition?
So it's all part of anything other than the 24 books of the scriptures are the oral tradition.
So that's primarily oral.
It's oral, yeah.
Original.
It originally was all oral
And
until
Moses-
it was written down. Yeah, yeah. And today we'll see why it's the most authoritative and why it's the most studied book or body of Jewish learning till today. So we're going to go a little history on the Mishnah of the Talmud. We all heard of the Rambam, right? Maimonides. Maimonides lived in the year 1135 till 1204. He's known as the Rambam, and he wrote something called the Mishnah Torah, which goes through all the 613 commandments in detail. I mean, real detail. Every law, it's all based on the Talmud. He lived in Egypt, and he lived in Spain. Yeah, he was born in Spain. He had to flee Spain because of the Almohads, because of the Muslims, and he went to, I think, Fez in Egypt, and ultimately he was buried in Israel, but he lived the last part of his life in Egypt. Yeah, actually, when he would sign his name, he would sign Moshe ben Maimon, translated in English, the one who basically he was saying that he is being over, transgressing 3 mitzvahs every day, transgressing 3 sins every day, because you're not allowed to live in Egypt, the Torah says. Your people should never return to Egypt. And here he was in Egypt. Of course, he was able to because it was life and death, or he had to live there, but he lived in Egypt, yeah. So the Rambam actually, in the beginning of his Mishnah Torah, of his compilation of all the mitzvahs, he talks about the history of the of the Torah from Mount Sinai all the way till the Mishnah. Actually, he has, if you could just, let's turn our pages for a moment, because I think this is very important and fascinating that we have it today. If you look at the end of this lesson, Page number. Where is it? Here, page 142. 142 in your books are basically the tradition, the chain of tradition, all the way from Moses. You see how it goes around, all the way till the writing of the Talmud. Okay, so the first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generations, and he tells us who the leaders of those generations were. The Jewish scholars, the leader of the Sanhedrin, and he writes it's so important because if one of these people, if one of these sort of generations would be, would drop the ball, drop the baton, we wouldn't have Judaism today. Because all of Judaism it was all transmitted orally. And if you look back, I think it's even in this paper, if you look at the history, at the timeline, you'll notice from the end of the giving of the Torah, next 500 years, nothing was printed. There were no printed books, not even printed, or even transcribed books for 500 years. Why not? Because it was all passed orally. As we learned last week, that anything that is part of the oral tradition has to be taught orally, cannot be written down. So for that 500 years, everything was written orally. So all these generations, all the way down until you see that the 22nd generation, that's the men of the Great Assembly, 120 sages. That's actually a story of Purim. It's around that time. Mordechai is one of them. They actually established prayer like we have it today. A lot of customs we have today come from the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the 22nd generation. But then again, it was oral all the way down till you have the 35th generation from Moses. That's when the Mishnah was compiled. 35th generation, bottom of the page. And it wasn't until the 40th generation that the Talmud was compiled. The Babylonian Talmud, 400 Common Era. Between 400 and 500 the Common Era, yeah.
Was scholarship involved at that time of our revolution?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. And this is all, anybody who says that, oh, maybe Judaism started some maybe 2,000 years ago, 500 years ago, or maybe somebody came up and said, here's a new religion and convinced everyone. But we have an unbroken tradition. We have all these people who we have teachings and writings from them all the way back from Moses until Rav Ashi and Ravina. Okay, so the Gemara, so we have the Mishnah. The Mishnah was transcribed by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and then like 6 or so generations later, the Talmud was compiled. Okay, so what happens? So let's try to do a brief history. The Torah is given at Mount Sinai. For 500 years, everything is just taught from teacher to student, teacher to student, teacher to student orally. Along comes a man by the name of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And why was it done that way? Because that was the purpose. The purpose was the human involvement. We're not supposed to learn from books. We're supposed to learn from teachers. And therefore, when you learn from a book, all you get is the words, the ink on the page. But if you learn from a teacher, you have the enthusiasm, you have the meaning, you have the excitement, there's so much more that you can learn from a human that you can learn from a page, from a paper, right? The motivation. So Torah, in order to transmit the Torah properly, with all its intentions, with all its excitement, it was meant to do orally. Okay.
Why did we change it?
Oh, why do we change it? Let's take a look at text 1, page 99. All the commandments that were given to Moses at Mount Sinai were given together with their explanation. The explanation is what we call the oral Torah. Moses transcribed the entire Torah by his own hand before his passing, but he did not transcribe its explanation. Rather, he instructed them to the elders and to Joshua and to the rest of Israel. This is why it's called oral Torah. From the days of Moses until Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, no one composed a text for the purpose of disseminating the oral Torah in public. Rather, in each generation, the head of the court or the prophet of that generation would write their own notes of the teachings they received from their teachers, and they would teach them orally to the public. Similarly, each person would write down for themselves, according to their ability, the teachings they heard regarding the explanation of the Torah and its laws, as well as the new concepts that were deduced in each generation using one of the 13 rules of biblical exegesis and accepted by the High Court. So it continued until the time of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. So the High Court were 70 leaders, 70 elders of every generation. They weren't elected. They didn't, vie for the job. They were vetted by the previous 70, and to make sure that only the most scholarly and wise and righteous people of that generation were part of that Sanhedrin. And it was their job to preserve all the oral tradition, all the explanations of the Torah and the laws and everything that went along with it. And that worked fine. It was wonderful, mostly because the Jews were centralized. They were all in Israel. So you had all in Israel, you have the High Court in Israel, and when the High Court has the Sanhedrin have the final say in the matter. Whatever you have a question, you send it to the Sanhedrin to let you know what the law is. How do they know it? Well, they have a tradition from the previous Sanhedrin and the previous Sanhedrin. There wasn't like one Sanhedrin died out and a new one came in. One passed away, they brought one in. The 69, 70, so they all taught each other. And the way the Sanhedrin worked, everyone a part of the Sanhedrin, every person, a member of the Sanhedrin had to have a voice, had to have a say. So when it came to making a ruling on a halachic issue, who had the first opinion? Who said their opinion first?
Yeah, elderly people.
The opposite.
Young people.
The youngest. Because once the elderly person said his statement, then the younger would be intimidated or would lean towards that opinion. Oh, if he thinks like that, then it must be right. So since they wanted to give everyone should express their own opinion, it was the youngest first, and then went up to the most scholarly. And it was a genius way of how the Sanhedrin worked, but it's for another, so that's for another lesson.
Yeah, very smart.
They all had to face each other. It wasn't like the Supreme Court just said, facing one way. It was like a circle, a semicircle, where everyone faced each other. You have to talk to each other. Okay.
You have to be proud of that.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Wait till you finish the lesson. You'll be more proud. So what happens then? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi comes along about 100 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. Okay, the Second Temple is destroyed. Now is the time. There's a danger because the Jews are being dispersed. Even when the Jews were exiled by the destruction of the First Temple, where did they go to? Babylonia, Bavel. You still had centers of learning in Bavel. You had in Israel. It was still okay. But after the destruction of the Second Temple, that's when the Jews really started dispersing, and there was no central authority. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, genius of a man, not only genius, but a great, great sage, so much so that he is known as Rebbe. Rebbe, what's Rebbe mean? Teacher. Every other rabbi has a name. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi. He was Rebbe. Or he was called Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. That was his name, Yehuda. The Nasi is a prince. Or Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy rabbi. Because he extremely a saintly man. And what he did was, he decided that, yes, he knew that the oral tradition has to be passed down orally. But if we don't write it down, if we don't transcribe it, we're going to lose it. Because we don't have any more central authority, any more central teacher. We don't have a Sanhedrin that can preserve it. If it's not going to be written down, it's going to be lost.
The Sanhedrin is a court. And what is the Pharisees? Is that?
The Pharisees are the religious people. The Sanhedrin were part of the Pharisees.
Oh,
Pharisees just mean the religious Jews, right?
but they are the Sanhedrin.
Well, you can call me a Pharisee too. I mean, the Pharisee, yeah. So the Sanhedrin were the holiest, the most saintly, and the most knowledgeable leaders of their generation.
So they made
when it came to Talmud, the king who wanted to translate the Talmud into Greek, he took 71 sages. That were the Sanhedrin. That's why it's called Septuagint, right? It means 70 to 70.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Looking at that chain of tradition, page 142, and also.
Yeah.
I don't see, King Saul mentioned.
King Saul is not there. King David's not there.
No,
King
David.
King David's there. Yeah.
No, Saul.
Saul's not there because Saul was his primary occupation was a king. Here we're talking about the transmitters of the Torah. David was a Torah scholar. David composed the Psalms. Solomon composed a Song of Songs and a few books in it, but Saul wasn't. He wasn't the transmitter of the tradition, of the oral tradition, like David and Solomon. Yeah. Okay. So in text, we're going to skip over text 2 just to talk about how the Sanhedrin worked. We'll go to text 3. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi collected all the teachings, all the laws, all the explanations and commentaries that were handed down from Moses and those that were taught by the courts in every generation concerning the entire Torah. From all of these, he composed the text of the Mishnah. He taught it publicly and revealed it to the Jewish people, who all wrote it down and disseminated it everywhere. Why did Rabbi Yehuda do this and not leave matters as they were? Because he saw that the students of Torah were becoming fewer. New troubles were constantly arising. The Roman Empire, which was suppressing the study and practice of Judaism, was spreading throughout the world and becoming more powerful. The Jewish people were being dispersed to the far ends of the earth. He therefore composed a single text that would be available to everyone, that would be learned quickly and would not be forgotten. Now, what is this Mishnah that you heard the word Mishnah?
Yes.
Right? What's the word Mishnah mean? Leshanot, right? To repeat. Leshanot, to repeat, because the idea is to study. It's not a book to read. It's something to constantly learn and relearn and relearn. And he wrote the Mishnah, which consists of how many books? Just like the Talmud, 63. 63 books that encompasses all of Jewish life. Anything you can think of is encompassed in that 63 books of the Mishnah. If you look at figure 3.2 in your books, you will see the orders of the Mishnah. You ever heard the word Shas? Shas?
Yeah.
It's a party in Israel, right? Why are they called Shas? What are they named after? It's Shas. The Talmud, another name for the Talmud, the Mishnah is Shas. Shas is Shisha Sidrei. Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. 6 orders of the Mishnah. That's called the Shas. These are the 6 orders. The first one is Zeraim, which encompasses the daily prayers, agricultural laws, tithing, farming, etc., which was very popular in Israel then. Second one is Moed, appointed times, the Shabbat, festival, the Jewish calendar. Third one is Nashim, literally women, but it refers to marriage, divorce, sexuality. All these laws are in Nashim. Fourth one is Zikin, damages. This is actually part of the Zikin, civil and criminal laws. Kedoshim, the temple service and the kosher dietary laws, Kashrut. And finally, Taharot, purities, laws of ritual purity. So out of in these 63 tractates, there are 523 chapters and 4,184 mishnot, means sections or mishnahs. So it's a whole field of study, but very important to know this. It was written very concise. What Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi had a dilemma. On the one hand, we have to write it down, or else it can be forgotten. On the other hand, it's not supposed to be written down. So what do? So write it so concisely, just minimalist. Write it in a way that you can read it, learn it, and you can glean from it, expound from it all the other laws that are needed. Don't write anything extra.
It's a distillation.
Yeah, exactly. And so every word in the Mishnah is precise. We can focus on a Mishnah and just take it apart and see, what did he mean by this Mishnah? Why did he write it this way? So number one, all those laws that were simple and were given, there was no arguments, he didn't even include. He didn't include in the Mishnah because everyone knows them. They're simple, right? You wake up in the morning, you wash your hands, okay. For example, what's the first tractate of Talmud and Mishnah? It's called Brachot. Brachot is blessings, all the blessings you can think of, prayers, blessings. And the first Mishnah, as soon as you open up the Mishnah, is Me'emasai Koirin Shema. From when do you read Shema in the evening? it says you should read Shema, b'shivtecha b'beitecha, b'lechtecha b'derech, u'b'shachbecha u'v'kumecha. The Torah says when you go to sleep, when you lay down, and when you wake up. Twice a day you should read the Shema. So the Talmud begins, the Mishnah begins, Shema, from when do you read the Shema at night? It means when it says at night, what does it mean? When it gets dark outside, when the sun starts setting, when? And until when? When do we, what's night mean? You see, the Mishnah doesn't say there is a mitzvah to read the Shema. It takes for granted we know you have to read the Shema because we read the Torah. So the Mishnah is starting from when do we say the Shema? What's the right proper time of saying the Shema? Okay, that's the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is very concise. We'll see in the example we're going to learn today. It's fascinating the way every word in the Mishnah is written for a specific reason. So that was the Mishnah. He wrote the Mishnah, but very concise and very precise, just to have it down that people won't forget the laws. And just like the written Torah, the scriptures are a code for the oral tradition. You can look it back and learn things from the words. So too, the Mishnah became the code, the source law for all of the oral tradition. Anything that would come afterwards is based on the Mishnah.
Where's Pirkei Avos?
Pirkei Avos in the Mishnah.
It's in the Mishnah.
Yeah, but a very interesting part of the Mishnah, because another difference between the Mishnah and Talmud is Mishnah is law. It's just telling you what to do, how to do it. It's not telling you philosophical ideas, stories, ethics. The only exception is Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is one chapter, Ethics of Our Fathers, that talks about ethical ideas, not mitzvahs. But all the other 62, it's all about what to do, how to do it. Bottom line, that's what he was afraid of. People are going to forget what to do and how to do it. So here we're writing the Mishnah in a concise manner, the minimalist possible, in order to remind people all the laws. Now the Talmud comes along and expounds upon the Mishnah, breaks apart the Mishnah. What did the Mishnah, because the Talmud now is a few hundred years later, right? 4 or 5 generations later. Now people are already starting to forget the Mishnah, or it's written, but what did the Mishnah mean? We all have this problem, right? In America, it's a big problem today. What did the founding fathers mean in the Second Amendment? So you have 2 schools of thought. They're both reading the Second Amendment, the same words, and 2 people are coming with opposite ideas. It all depends what the focus is on, right? Who should be armed? The militia or your? So you can have the same thing in the Mishnah. The Mishnah text is there, and for that generation, the next generation, they understood it. They got all the meanings behind it. But a few generations later, are the next generations going to understand what the Mishnaic, what the Yehuda Nasi meant when he wrote this concise Mishnah? Perhaps not. So then the Talmud comes along and says, okay, we have to expound upon that now. We have to really, and also there were a lot of things that came up between those few generations that weren't applicable before. So they wrote the Talmud. So for example, this example we gave before, the Mishnah starts, from when do we read the Shema? What's the proper time to read the Shema? In the evening. What's the Talmud going to ask? 1 second. Where do we know you have to read the Shema? Oh, so we'll go back in the source in the Torah. How do we know we read the Shema? And how do we know it's in the evening? And how do we know, how does the Mishnah know that the evening means this and this time? And then it sort of breaks it apart and it really delves into expounding upon the Mishnah. Okay? That's really what the Gemara is. Here, figure 3.3 on page 106, you'll see sort of the history and the map of the Talmud. If you notice on this map, on the right side, you have Bavel, Babylonia, present-day Iraq. And the left side, you have Israel, right? There were 2 schools. It's very important to note also, when the Jews were exiled, everyone was in Israel. They were exiled, the first temple was destroyed, they were exiled to Bavel. Then they were allowed, 70 years later, they were allowed to rebuild the temple. But the vast majority of Jews didn't return. They stayed in Bavel. They didn't want to come back. A minority of Jews came back to Israel. So when they were in Bavel, these 70 years, they established great yeshivas. There was the great yeshiva of Pumbedisa, this Pumbedisha, Narda, Sura. They all had the great Jewish leaders. And then there were some rabbis who went back to Israel and lived in primarily Tiberia, and they started transcribing the Talmud, but two separate Talmuds. Because in Babylonia, they started transcribing what they call a Talmud. First of all, it was in Aramaic, because that was the language there. And they started transcribing, and it lasted for many years, like for 6 generations or so, they were transcribing this Talmud. In Israel, they started transcribing their own Talmud. It only lasted 3 generations, because then they had persecution, and it was under the Romans, and they couldn't study Torah anymore, and it stopped after 3 generations. So until today, we have the Babylonian Talmud, and we have the Jerusalem Talmud. If you look at the Talmud, what does it say here? Talmud Bavli, Babylonian Talmud. When you think of it, what someone says, it says in the Talmud, they're referring to the Babylonian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud is more authoritative than the Jerusalem Talmud. Sometimes there's contradictions, and when there is a contradiction, we follow the Babylonian Talmud for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was compiled later. So whilst the Jerusalem Talmud was only for a couple of generations, this went on for quite a few generations later, because in Babylonia, in Bavel, the Jews were able to study in greater peace than under the Romans in Jerusalem, in Israel. So they had sort of the final say. It was sort of codified later. So they had all the information, and also the style of learning in the Babylonian Talmud was different than the Jerusalem Talmud, and we'll see it soon. So, for example, the Jerusalem Talmud, straightforward. What's the law? What's the law? Just give me the law. Give me the bottom line. There's actually an example. One of the readings here, it gives a good example of the difference between the Babylonian Talmud. I'm going back and forth, but don't worry. It says here, text 5 on page 111. All right, he has set me in dark places. Said Rabbi Yirmiyah, this is the learning of Babylonia. And the commentaries explain, if you lose something, there's 2 ways of finding it. One way is under the light. Oh, I found it. Great, pick it up. The other way is groping in the darkness. You grope, this is it. No, this is not it. Doesn't feel like it. This is it. This is not it. Until you find it, right? The Babylonian Talmud, before it gets to the actual conclusion, they'll say, oh, maybe this is the case. Oh, no, this is not the case. Maybe this is what it means. No, maybe, until finally it comes to the conclusion. What's the advantage of doing it that way? Because along the way, you've explored so many things. So later on, when a new case would come up, a new scenario, you have a lot more information to work with. Right. So the doctor tells me, after years of studying medicine, the doctor tells me that, this just tells me whatever is a fact of medicine. Okay, now I have that fact. But let's say a new medical scenario comes up. I don't know what to do. He knows, because his conclusion came from years of study and, a lot of information that was, went around his mind till he finally came to the conclusion. Somebody who invents a product, until the product's actually invented, there's a lot of trial and error. The trial and error is not a mistake. It's not for naught, because that can help in future inventions. There's so much that you learn from the errors or from the, groping in the dark that can help in the future. So the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, it just goes through so much before it actually comes to the final conclusion that allows us, and that's what halachics we'll learn next week. The halachics would actually use to learn new laws. Yeah.
So we had a few thousand years from the time we got the written Torah to the time that we concluded with the Babylonian Talmud. So who decided, and why did they decide that the learning process of the future, why have we not continued from the time of
Good question.
the Babylonian Talmud to now?
Right.
Because all the things that we have going on now, there was some basis of it back there, and we have stopped.
Right.
So who decided that we
So why? Well, yeah, right. Good. a good question. When it comes to the written Torah, the scriptures, I get it. They codified these scriptures, and that's it. There's no more prophets afterwards. That was the era of prophecy. That was scriptures. That was God's word. When it comes to the oral tradition, the Talmud, the mission of the Talmud, why did it have to stop? Why couldn't it just continue and just until today? We can have 600 books of the Talmud. The primary reason for that is a technical one. There's a couple of reasons, but the technical reason is that when the Jews were all centralized, whether it's in Bologna or Jerusalem, and they had a central court, everyone followed that authority. So if there was a question, even if there was a dispute between the Sanhedrin or whatever it is, there was the method of how they came to a conclusion, and that was accepted by everyone. And there's a few stories in the Talmud which are actually fascinating about certain great rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer, like the greatest rabbi of his time, Rabbi Gamliel, who argued vehemently about a certain case. One of the examples is when Yom Kippur should be. He felt that Yom Kippur should be on this day. And the majority of the rabbis said, no, it should be the next day. Based on the moon or whatever it was, it's a complicated idea. And since they were the majority, and that's the rule, he ate on the day he thought it was Yom Kippur. He knew in his mind, today is Yom Kippur. But because there is a system, a structure that says you follow the majority of the Sanhedrin, as soon as the majority said, no, tomorrow's Yom Kippur, he accepted it. Because that's the way Judaism worked. Everyone accepted the authority of the final word of the Sanhedrin. Then, after the time of the Talmud, the Jews dispersed, some to Spain, some to Europe. You have the Spanish Jews became Spartan, and the German Jews became Ashkenazim, and now they're not following a central authority. So, for example, Maimonides, we're going to learn next week about Maimonides, he's a Sephardic rabbi. He ruled, he gave some rulings, but it was accepted by the Sephardim, not the Ashkenazim. He was a great man, Rabbi Meir Hagola, who lived over 1,000 years ago. He was a leader of the German Jewry, of the Ashkenazim Jews. He made a few edicts. It's called Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom. For example, one of them was, even though you're allowed to marry more than one woman in the Torah, right? Abraham did, Jacob did. He said, no, we're decreeing you're not allowed to, for various reasons. The Ashkenazi community accepted it because he was the Ashkenazic authority. And they accepted upon it. And since then, no Ashkenazim will marry more than one woman, even if they live in Utah. Not going to happen, right? The Sephardim never took it upon themselves. So they continued to marry more than one woman. Or for another example, today, the Ashkenazim went to Germany, and Ashkenazim rabbis on Passover came up with an idea because of a certain fear that on Passover you shouldn't eat legumes, kitniot, rice. No eating rice in Yom. The Sephardic Jews never heard of that. They were in Spain. They never knew of it, and they never accepted upon themselves. So the Sephardic Jews can eat rice and no problem on Passover. Ashkenazim Jews can't because we follow the authority of Ashkenazim. Now, that was when you have a central authority, Ashkenazim and Sephardim. Then it splintered even more, and Jews dispersed around the world. And every community has a rabbi. Every city has a rabbi. So what are you going to make? The Valencia Talmud and the Brooklyn Talmud, and right? So as soon as that period where the Jews were centralized with the Sanhedrin came to a close, there was no authority to create new laws or new edicts or new gezerot that would be accepted by the Jews as a whole. That stopped. And that's why the last authoritative book is the Talmud, which all the other works, whatever we learn next week and the following week, are all based on the Talmud. So that's the short history. If you look at the page 107, we'll go back to page 107, because this is going to be an introduction to the Talmudic study we're going to actually learn today. So you have the Mishnah. You see the Mishnah there on page figure 3.4. The Mishnah is the Mishnah. The Mishnah is short, concise, tells you the law. What does the Talmud do? So the Talmud, first of all, goes backwards and says, Minahanemili. Where's the source of this law? You're telling me I have to read Shema? Oh, 1 second. How do you know that? And it traces it back to the scriptures, to the Torah. That's what the Talmud does. Okay. Another thing it does backwards, the Mai Kamifligi. What's the basis of this reasoning behind the different opinions in the Mishnah? The Mishnah has two opinions. Reb Meir says you're obligated. Rabbi Yehuda says you're not obligated. One second, where do they get it from? What's the basis of their opinions? So the Talmud sort of works back, tries to find the source of the law back in the scriptures, in the Torah, and also if there's a disagreement, why are they disagreeing? What's the source of the disagreement? It also works laterally. See on the right. It introduces other Mishnaic teachings that are not in the Mishnah. So this is a key word also. You ever hear the word brisa, breita? The Mishnah was the compilation of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi of things to be put into the book. But there were a lot of teachings that were not put into the book. They're called brisa. Why is it called a brisa? Because brisa in Aramaic means outside. They were left out. But they're still equally important as the Mishnah. But for whatever reason, they weren't included. Okay, so for example, even if you open up a Mishnah and you say in the Talmud, it says Tanan, we learned. It's going to bring another reference out. Tanan, we learned somewhere else. Sometimes it says Tanya, we learned somewhere else. What's the difference? If it says Tanan, it means he's quoting another Mishnah or Brisa. If it says Tanya, he's quoting a Talmudic scholar from the time of the Talmud, not the Mishnah. So every word is concise. Another thing that the Talmud does laterally is Raminuhu. There's a contradiction. Hey, this Mishnah says this. I found you a Mishnah there that says the opposite. What's going on? Which one's right? And then the Talmud will spend a page or two or three trying to reconcile these two Mishnahs, either by saying they're talking about two different things, two different scenarios, or by saying, this goes according to this opinion, this goes according to that opinion. Trace back to the source of the disagreement or the seeming contradiction between my Kamashmalan. We learned today at this technique. My Kamashmalan. What's the Mishnah teaching us? By adding certain words. There's extra words in the Mishnah. Why does the Mishnah have extra words when it's so concise? Must be a reason. So Talmud will go of 1, 2, 3 pages trying to figure out why did Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi put this extra word in? Fascinating. Okay, we'll go on to the forward. Also goes forward. It'll bring up new cases. One second. If the Mishnah said A, what about B? What about a new case? What about this case? Can we infer the law in case B from case A in the Mishnah? And it tries to do that. And then Tashema, is trying to bring proofs. It will constantly try to bring proof to the Mishnah or to the Talmud tries. It's interesting. It tries to refute the Mishnah. The Mishnah says this. 1 second, but it says this. And then it'll try to bring proof or try to reconcile them or bring proof to this opinion, that opinion. For example, the Mishnah will say, Rabbi Meir says this, Rabbi Yehuda says this. And the Talmud will say, I have a proof to Rabbi Meir. Another sage will say, no, I have a proof to Rabbi Yehuda. And they'll keep on going. And at the end, they'll either reconcile or not. But it's a long process till you get there.
That you always hear quotes from the Talmud, would actually have saving one life is like saving the world.
That's a Mishnah.
So they have quotes in there like that?
Yeah, it's a Mishnah that's based on halakha. The Mishnah is law, is Jewish law. So the Jewish law, for example, that case is actually going back about why God created Adam singular. Why didn't he create people like he created animals? How many cows did God create on the 6th day of creation? I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, a million. I don't know how many. Why didn't God create people? Just populate the world with people. Why start with one? And the Mishnah says to teach us a lesson that every human being is a whole world, entire universe.
Well, they talk about the dinosaurs.
Why don't they talk about dinosaurs? Okay, that we'll get. We're not gonna get that today. It's a whole. It's put it this way. Imagine I asked you. I just came to this. I'm from the Stone Age. I just arrived. I want 6 lessons. I want you to teach me the history, the mythology, and all the research of medicine in 90 minutes. Next week, I want you to do that with music, all the history and the styles and the genres of music in 90 minutes. And the next week to philosophy. It's impossible, right? What we're doing here, basically, we can study Talmud or the methods of Talmud or the different techniques of Talmud for 6 weeks easily.
Well, you're
90
still
minutes.
You're still doing it after 40 years of living, right?
Right, right. I think even just teaching the techniques of the overview of Talmud you can give for Steindal's has a couple of books on the overview of Talmud. I mean, it's fascinating, but it's a long. So we're not going to get into everything today, but yeah.
This argument is being taken place in today's day as well.
Yes, today. So the oral tradition continues today. So next week, for example, we'll learn about halacha. The halachics were the Maimonides, the Rosh, and other great halachic authorities. And then came there was the Chassidut, the mysticism. Till today, for example, the J law. You have interesting things that come up today. For example, using an elevator on Shabbat. Yes or no? So what was debated? It's debated. They look back in the Talmud and the Mishnah. Everything has to be traced back to the Talmud and the Mishnah. Right? They didn't have elevators, but you can learn from the Talmud, Babylonian Talmud, of how it goes back and forth and prove and different. You can glean some messages there.
You're allowed to walk. You know, if your teaching is critical thinking, this is all critical thinking. This is
right.
Incredible.
Right. So how do they know? How do we know electricity? We don't use electricity on Shabbat. They didn't have electricity then.
It's energy.
But what does the Talmud talk about? They talk about makaba patish, which is like creating a circuit, is doing the final deed to create something new. Makaba patish means so put the hammer, taking the hammer and doing the final blow, the nail into the. You're not allowed to do that. So we learn from that's one of the avodas, one of the malachas, the works we don't do on Shabbat. So therefore, that based on that and other place in the Talmud, we learn that creating a circuit, electrical circuit, is prohibited in Shabbos. Now the question becomes, okay, creating electric circuit is forbidden on Shabbos. How about an elevator that you're not creating a circuit, it just keeps on going up and down? In Israel, they have the elevators that stop at every floor, and nothing happens when you go on. So you're signing it, yeah. So halakha, most halachic authorities will say that's fine. You're okay.
What do you mean?
It means it stops whether anybody's in there or not. It stops at every floor. Some will say, so will be stringent and say yes, it's true, but when an extra 100 pounds, 200 pounds goes into the elevator, it has to work harder. All right. So there are differences of opinion there. Some people would decide to be more strict. For example, I don't use an elevator on Shabbat, even if it stops on every floor. But if you told me you're going to Passover, you're going to the Hyatt, and they have a Shabbos elevator, I'll say, Gesundheit, hey, halachically it's okay. Even though I decided to be more strict. But there's a difference between knowing the law and then taking it to the next level and being strict personally. Use the stairs. We used the Hyatt the first few years for the high holidays. And they don't have stairs inside, right? Hyatt doesn't have stairs. There's stairs you have to go through their kitchen or outside. And we used to go through the kitchen. We were like, we owned the place. Every time we had to go upstairs to our rooms, we had to go through the kitchen and upstairs. That's what we had to do. But today, every year now they have the Passover program, the Pesach program in the Hyatt in Valencia, and they make an Eruv outside, so you can go outside and carry outside to the stairs. Okay. Another interesting thing about the Talmud before we get into the sugya and the subject. You'll find in the Talmud, it'll start off with one subject and then go off to another subject. Go on to another subject that's sort of connected. I'll give you an example. If you want to know the laws of Hanukkah, what tractate are you going to open up Hanukkah? There's no tractate Hanukkah. There is a tractate Megillah, which talks about Purim, but there's no tractate Hanukkah. So what do we do for Hanukkah? Well, why isn't there a tractate Hanukkah? Because the Mishnah was written before Hanukkah. The Talmud was written after Hanukkah. But when they wrote the Mishnah was written in the beginning of the Second Temple era. The story of Hanukkah happened at the end of the Second Temple era. So there was no Hanukkah. But by the time they put the Talmud into writing, there was Hanukkah, so they had to include it. But they're not going to create a new tractate, so they included it in the tractate of Shabbat, of Shabbos. How? This is how it goes. Second chapter of Shabbos starts off by Memadlikin. Which oils or wicks can you light the Shabbos candle? Friday night, you gotta light Shabbos candles. What can you use as oil? You use gas, kerosene. What can you use? So there's certain oils you could use, certain you can't use. Some oils, if they don't catch very well and they flicker, and we're afraid that on Shabbat you'll sort of relight it, or some give off a bad smell with it. So certain you could, certain you can't. Okay. What does the Talmud ask then? Oh, if that's the case in Shabbos, does that also apply to Hanukkah candles? The same laws as Shabbos candles. And once you discuss that, the Talmud asks, hey, what is Hanukkah? And it goes to the whole story of Hanukkah. And then once it goes to that, it tells you another law about Hanukkah that is authored by, was said by Rabbi Kahana. And once you say that, oh, Rabbi Kahana also said something else about Joseph in the pit that has a beautiful message. So now we go off to Joseph in the pit because it was said by Rabbi Kahana, who said something about Hanukkah, and it keeps on going. Everything is sort of interconnected. It has some sort of string attached to it. And like I say, you have to count the cup because eventually you're going to get back to where you came from. So you have to sort of remember everything and how they're connected, and then come back. So it's
Segwaying now, you're going off target. Off topic.
Yes, you're definitely going off target, but you're not going off target completely because it's a guided off target. It's a purpose, right? You're going off a tangent for a purpose. Okay, so where are you going to tell me this beautiful teaching of Joseph in the pit? There is no tractate that talks about Joseph in the pit. But since Rabbi Kahana is the one that said this lesson from Joseph in the pit, and he also said the law about Hanukkah, so when we mention his name already, we'll mention his story of the pit. So it's an interesting method there. Okay, I don't want to take away from the actual learning, so we're going to go straight to the learning of today's experiencing the Talmud. Okay, so we're going to go to text 7, page 113. This is a classic chapter or sugya subject in the Talmud called Shnai Meifsim Batalis. It's actually in here. It's the second chapter in this Bava Metzia. We learned this I learned it when I was probably 12 years old, and we're going to learn it in 20 minutes. You go to yeshiva, and they start the Shnai Meifsim Batalis, this sugya, this subject, 3 hours a day. You'll probably get through it in 2 months, 3 months. I mean, it's extremely, extremely involved with all the commentaries in the back and the hundreds and thousands of commentaries that were not put in this book. So it's a very involved subject, but we're going to get a taste, I think a nice, good, delicious taste of this sugya. Okay, so let's learn the Mishnah. We start with a concise and precise Mishnah, and then we'll take the Talmud and sort of break it apart. Shnai Meifsim Batalis. Two people are grasping a garment. This one says, I found it. This one says, I found it. This one says, all of it is mine. This one says, all of it is mine. So what should be? This one should swear that his share in it is no less than half, and this one should swear that his share in it is no less than half, and they divide it. That's the Mishnah. Two people are coming to court. They're both holding this talis. Talis doesn't necessarily mean a talis. It means a cloth, a garment, right? A garment. They're holding a garment. You're holding, I'm holding. I found it. I found it. You say, I found it. It's mine. It's mine. So the court now has a dilemma. There's no proof. There's no name on it. I mean, they just found it. There's no deed or what do? Whose is it? There's no witnesses. So what did the court do? So the Mishnah says, simple. The court makes each one swear that they don't that at least half of it is theirs. We'll soon see why. And then it divides it. Cut it in half. You get half the garment. You get half the garment. Go in peace. That's the Mishnah. Now, any questions on this Mishnah or any words that seemingly shouldn't be there, or you see a weird technique the Mishnah uses? Yeah, sure.
So my sister married, did a do too. And
Mhm.
we share many holidays with Passover in particular. And watching them eat rice and throw, parsley at each other and all this stuff, it's different. So how do we come together? Who's ready? Never eaten rice in my
Right.
life. And it's crazy.
Yeah. Rice on Pesach. Right.
Last Passover, I said I was converting to Sephardic. Yeah.
Right, right. So it's a good question. So who's right? Let me ask you a question. I told my child that they can only watch 15 minutes of videos a day. Come home from school, they have to do homework, 15 minutes of video. He has a friend whose parents told him that he can watch a half an hour of video. I don't let my kids watch Netflix. It has to be Jewish videos. That parents do let their kids watch children's videos on Netflix. Who's right? Right. It's not one's right, one's wrong. One child has to listen to their parents, and my child has to listen to my parents. So the way it works is after the central, Sanhedrin were no more, every community listens to their authority, to their rabbi. The Sephardim followed the Sephardic customs, and the Ashkenazim followed the Ashkenazi customs. So for a Sephardi, it's right to eat rice on Pesach. For me, it's not right, because I'm Ashkenaz. I follow the tradition, the customs of my ancestors.
And this is very healthy. This is a
Yeah.
very healthy psychological position because it allows for plurality. And plurality is democratic.
Up until Ashkenaz marries a Sephardi. Okay.
That's what we call tourists.
Yeah. No, it happens. It happens. Yeah. The Rebbe actually encouraged it. The Rebbe, a few people asked the Rebbe encouraged them into marriage. Yeah.
It begins to spread out.
As long as there's a consensus before they get married between the couple of which laws, which customs are we following, everything's good. But I remember before Passover, before Pesach, I was in the Kollel, I was studying, and the leader of the rabbi of the Kollel, he gave us a whole, it's an hour and a half lecture about to recognize that every family, when it comes to Passover, has different stringencies and different customs. And your wife probably has different customs than you. Recognize that they're customs. And your peace in your home is more important than customs. Okay? So to recognize that there's law is law. You can't take away law. Law is law. If my wife tells me eat chametz on Pesach, we have a problem in our marriage. But if my wife is Sephardic and say we're going to eat rice in this house on Pesach, okay, it's not prohibited to eat rice on Pesach, right? So it says Elo Dibra L'Kim Chaim. They're both right. They're both right.
So you should date each other for at least a year, so you know where you stand in every holiday before you get married.
There's a questionnaire you can just pull out and ask. As long as there's respect between each other and recognition that we're not going to harm our marriage over customs, as long as it's not that we're going to, we're not going to throw away Jewish customs. The question is, which custom are we going to adapt, right? Sephardic and Ashkenazi, which both have a source in Torah. So for that, it's not worth ruining a marriage or having hardships.
Different solution to that thing with drum. You put a dollar amount value to it, okay, and one buys the other.
Yeah, that's what you do. That's what you do. Yachloiku, you split it. What it means is, if it's a talit that can be split and become into two garments, fine. If it's not, or if one person wants it, or if you have a garment that's like a shirt, what are you gonna do? Cut a shirt down the middle of it. It's not gonna help anybody. Then you either sell it and split the money, or one person takes it and pays the other half the money. Yeah. That's what the Talmud actually discusses that. Yeah.
Logical stuff. It's logical. Whatever makes sense.
Yeah. So the real question here, where am I here? Okay. So let me ask you a couple questions on this Mishnah right away. If you're telling me, Rabbi, that the Mishnah is concise and precise, this Mishnah doesn't seem concise and precise. It could have said, two people are holding a garment, each one claiming it for himself, what do you do?
Rabbi.
Why? One person
Rabbi-
says, I
yeah,
found it. Rabbi Yitzchak, I like that, yeah. You should write the Talmud. One says, I found it. The other says, I found it. One said it's mine. The other said it's mine. And if I said I found it, obviously it's mine, right? And who cares if I found it, or if I inherited it, or if I bought it? What if I found it?
I don't know, this is a little bit like a trial that we go through that I go through all the time.
Right.
And in this particular situation, both have possession. And as they say. the old
Possession is
saying
9/10 of the
saying,
law. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
However, here are two people, if you put, if judges, and I've been a judge pro tem many times, sometimes with the credit, after you've asked the questions of each person and drilled them with their perception and cross-examined them, because perception is one of the matters that you have when you cross-examine people.
Mhm.
And if you still can't have a right, to me, both of them, neither one of you does it belong to, but because it's a piece of property, it belongs to somebody else. And that is who we're going to give it.
Okay. That's what I'll tell you why the Talmud doesn't do that. Because for the Talmud is about justice. No, two people come to court holding a garment. It belongs to one of them. Fact of the matter is, it belongs to one of them. Questions, we don't know which one. But to take it away from both of them would be saying that, both of you don't have possession. They both do have possession. Okay, so you're focusing good on the word, they found it. Okay, good. So they found it. So
That's a big word.
well, right. So the Talmud discusses the word they found it and says, 1 second, if they found it, doesn't belong to them. Why is the Mishnah even discussing it? So we must say that it's talking about a type of garment that you don't have to return after you find. So there's a whole chapter in Talmud that's called Elo Mitzias. There's certain things that you find on the street that you have to return. Certain things you find in the street, somebody lost, you can keep. For example, a dollar bill. No need to return it. No need to find the owner, because every dollar bill looks the same and nobody can give an identifying marker of this dollar bill. So unless it was like put up like a pyramid, whatever. But if I found a garment, just came out of Macy's, right? Just came out of Macy's, new garment. Macy's has hundreds of them. I don't know whose it is. So nobody can identify this new garment, so I can keep it. Can I go beyond the letter of the law? Yeah. I don't have the obligation to return something that doesn't have an identifying marker, like that nobody can identify and give me the identifying signs. I don't have to return it. But that's a different law. Okay. So let's say we're talking about here a garment that's a tallis. Let's say it's a tallis, right? A blue tallis like this. There are tons of them. I come out of shul and two people are coming with a tallis. It was just bought from a vendor. We're in Crown Heights. Hundreds of people have the same tallis. I go for the Kinus HaShluchim, the conference of rabbis, once a year. And sometimes on Shabbat, after davening, you go to Farbrengen and you leave your tallis somewhere. If it's a new tallis, forget about it. I'm not finding my tallis because everybody came in and bought a new tallis. And I don't know, there's no way I can identify my tallis unless I've been wearing it for years. I smell it and I know it's mine. But otherwise, how do I know what's my tallis? So if I find a new tallis, brand new tallis, in a community that there's hundreds of new talisim, nobody can identify it. So I'm just telling you what the halacha says. We're not going to get into that halacha. That's a side halacha. So halacha says is
there other mishnahs that you can use in order that overcome that?
No. There's the Mishnah. This Mishnah has no argument. Even in the Mishnah, there's nobody that says that I would have to return it. I find a dollar bill in the street, nobody says I have to return it.
But it's not, the question is not, do you have to return it? What efforts are you going to make?
That's separate. That's going beyond the letter of the law. That's something I could do and I should do, don't have to do. Okay, because since nobody can give me identifying marker for this dollar bill or $100 bill, therefore I'm going to give it back to the person on trust. That's it. if I say I found $100 bill, who lost it? It's me. Oh, I lost it. When I'm giving it back to him, I'm just giving it on trust because he can't identify it. Do I have to? No. Nice to? Yeah. I trust him. But I don't have to trust everybody who says he lost $100. But let's put it aside for a moment, okay? I know it's hard. So two people come to Bet Din. They're holding a talus. One says, I found it. The other one says, I found it. Why do they have to find it? Maybe they bought it. Why are they both holding the talus? Maybe they say, we were just arguing over a talus in the street or in the house. Why do they say the whole thing belongs to me? Why do you have to swear that I don't own less than half? It seems like a weird statement. So all these questions are explained in the Talmud. Talmud explains why the Mishnah says every word of these things, and we'll explain it now. Okay, so we'll start number one. First of all, remember the Mishnah goes backwards, and the Mishnah wants to know the source of the law. Two people come to Bet Din, and they're holding a talus. What does the Bet Din do? Split it. Why? Where do you know that from the Torah? So let's take a look at text 8, and this is the Talmud in Baba Kama explains, and we put
the baby.
what? And the baby, yeah. So Amar Rav Shmuel bar Achmeni said, from where do we know the rule that the one who is seeking to take property out of his fellow's possessions is incumbent upon him to provide the evidence? From the verse, whoever as a matter of education should approach them, he must present the evidence. So basically, without going in great detail, Moses went up Mount Sinai. He was the judge, right? He goes to Mount Sinai. He's not going to be here now. Who's going to judge the people? So he hires, he puts together Aaron and Hor, certain people, and he says, whoever has this in Hebrew, mi bal devarim, whoever has a problem with another person, should go to these leaders. We learn from here that if you want to get something out of another person who has possession of something, it's incumbent upon you to bring proof. Like you said, possession is 9/10 of the law. In Judaism, possession is 10/10 of the law. Possession is everything. That means if I come to court, I'm holding a garment. You come running after me. He stole that from me. And I say, no, it's mine. I found it. You say, no, I found it. You stole it from me. Bet Din will say, hey, he's holding it. You're not holding it. You want to get that out of his hand? Bring proof it's yours. I mean, we call it in Hebrew chazakah. Chazakah means strength, means possession. Possession in Judaism is so strong that the one who's trying to get the article out of the possession of another, it's called hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. Somebody who's trying to take something from his friend's possession, he has to bring proof. Now, remember, the court doesn't know anything. The judges don't know who it belongs to. There is no proof. It's two people arguing. He says, she says, or he says, or she says, she says. What do you do? Some people are more believable than others. Some people are more charismatic than others. Some people can fool other people better than others. I can't just say, I'll test them and see whose it is. Maybe I could, maybe I can't. But somebody who's a really good swindler can easily outfool his friend. So what do? So we learn from the Torah, that verse in the Torah, that possession is so strong that if you don't have possession and you want to take possession, you have to bring proof. Now, if that's the case, that's why that's why the Mishnah says Shnayim Oichsim Batalis. Why does the Mishnah say this sort of weird case where two people, imagine this, two people are running into court, one's holding one side of the talus, the other side. Because it had to bring us a case where two people have possession. Two people have possession. If both of them didn't have possession, in this case, it wouldn't be the same law, wouldn't be the same outcome. You wouldn't say split. You would say whoever has the possession is stronger and it belongs to him, unless the other one can bring proof to take it up. Okay, so that's number one, why it says that Shnayim Oichsim Batalis, two people are holding the talus. So let's take a look at text 9. Rashi comments. It is specifically in the case that they are both grasping the garment, meaning that both are in possession of it, and neither one has a stronger hold on it than the other. But if only one of them were holding the garment, And the other one has the status of one who is seeking to take property out of his fellow's possession, and it would be incumbent upon him to provide proof by bringing witness that it is his. He would not be believed to get any part of the garment with just an oath. Okay. So now we know from this Mishnah, number one, possession is so great that if two people are possessing it after they swear, you would split it. If one person possesses it, that person would get it. But now, asks the Talmud, the forward thinking, how about if nobody possesses it? It's in nobody's possession. Okay, what does that mean? How could it be possible they're fighting over something that is in nobody's possession? So let's take a look at text 10. Again, the same Talmud. There was quoting now a case. There was a certain boat that two people were quarreling about. This one said, it is mine, and the other one said, it is mine. One of them came to court and said, seize it until I'm able to bring witnesses that it is mine. Do we seize it or do we not seize it? So what's happening here? They're fighting over a boat. They're not holding a boat. It's not in any one of their possession. It's out there in the water, right? Or it's under the swamp, whatever it is, right? So no one's in possession. One guy comes to court and says, I have proof that it's mine, but I don't want him to take it in the meantime. So please, court, hold on to it until I bring my proof. So does the court intervene and take hold of this boat? So there's an argument. Rav Huna says we seize it, or Yehuda says we do not seize it. What happened in that case was the court seized the boat. Now it's in the court's possession. But the man went and did not find witness. He then said to the court, release the boat, and whoever is stronger will prevail. I couldn't find witness. Now let the boat go and I'll grab it. I'll get possession. Do we release it? We don't release it. Rav Yehuda said we do not release it, or Papa says we release it. What's the law? The law is we do not seize the property in such a case. That means originally the court should not have seized the property. If one guy comes in and says, yeah, I have proof, please, seize the property, we don't mix it. But if it did seize it, we do not release it. Basically, what's happening here? We learn from here that if no one has the possession of this item, the court does not get involved. Leave me alone. Don't get me involved. No, none of you have possession of it. If two people have possession, the court has to get involved because the court's job is to defend a possessor, ownership. That's the court's job. And since here we have an owner, or in this case, two possessors, two owners, we have to defend them. We have to defend the ownership. Therefore, we have to come to resolution. But in the case of the boat where there's no owners, no one has possession of it, the law is courts stay out of it. Don't do anything. Okay?
So in this particular case, the decision simply says, since we abstain, you have to fight it out yourselves.
Yeah, that's actually the term of the Gemara. Fight it out yourself. Call the Alam Gvar, whoever stronger wins. Because
Or bring me the evidence.
oh yeah. If there's evidence, trumps everything. If there's evidence that it belongs to one, even if I have evidence that the boat belongs to me, even if he's holding the boat, he's on the boat, lives in the boat, the court will give it back to me because it's evidence. Evidence is either evidence or the primary evidence witnesses. That would make it. Then they would take it out of one possession and give it to another possession. But here we're talking all these cases. There's no evidence, no witness.
Here, in at least the American law now, sometimes we have that situation, but we have something that really helps out, where the person that's claiming possession or ownership of something, and yet there's no evidence right then and there. Preliminarily, the court can say, yes, you post bond for the value of this, and we're going to set it for hearing. You bring back some more evidence. Otherwise, the restraining order is going to be dissolved.
Right.
And that's the end of it.
Right. So the reason why the Talmud doesn't do that, the Mishnah doesn't do that. The Mishnah, even the first case when you split the garment, it's not ideal. One person's being cheated out of it. It's not ideal, but that's the best that the court can do, because the court there's no evidence. The court says okay, but in a case where nobody has possession, the court has no authority or no business in creating possession for one, and
It's
therefore it does.
separate. And you brought up the point. To go fight it out is not civilized society.
Right, but I don't mean fight it out physically. Yeah, yeah.
Or, well,
What-
it could create that.
Right, but how is it going to help if the court, again, here we're talking about there is no evidence. There's no proof, there's no evidence that will ever arise that this belongs to him.
Today. But if you gave the person the opportunity, a day or two.
But you're always giving him the opportunity, because even if the other person grabs it, you still have the opportunity to bring your evidence and take it away from him. Okay, let's go for it. So now, right now we have 3 cases. And now we'll see now it's going to get exciting. So we have 3 cases. Number 1, the case of 2 people holding, split it. Second one, no possessors. Sorry, 1 possessor. 1 possessor, he gets it. Third case is no possessors. No one's holding it, no chazaka, court stays out of it. So now the Talmud brings in another case. This is where it gets complicated, but a little tricky. Okay. We'll skip 11 because I just explained 11. So now we're going to go to text 12. Now we went backwards, the source of the law. We went to forward. How about a new law that is no possessors or 1 possessor? Now we're going to go lateral. We're going to bring another case in the Mishnah, and we'll see how it may be a contradiction. Okay, and how we resolve that. Text 12, page 120. 2 people entrusted money with a third person. One deposited 100 dinars and one deposited 200 dinars. This one says the 200 are mine, and this one says the 200 are mine. What do? We give 100 to one, 100 to the other, and the remainder is put away until the prophet Elijah comes. Okay? We'll explain it. You're right. Said Rabbi Yossi, if we do that, the swindler loses nothing. Rather, all the money should be put away until Elijah comes. Okay, so we'll just leave those 2 lines and focus in the beginning in the meantime. So what happens here? 2 of you entrust me with money, an envelope. You gave me an envelope, you gave me an envelope. One of you gave me $100, another one gave me $200. I don't know who, because they're in envelopes, right? Blank envelopes. Now I return the money. We both come to return the money. I say, oh, I don't know which envelope is which. One has 100, one has 200. You both say, I gave you 200. What do I do now?
Get the fingerprint. So they can check the fingerprints.
The fingerprints. Huh? I should have marked it. I'm a battling. I did.
Test the DNA
So-
on the envelope because it's
So
been licked.
here's a case where obviously the Talmud, the Mishnah doesn't blame me, because if it blamed me, it would have told me to pay it. So it doesn't blame me. So whatever reason, I'm not to blame. Now, what do we do with it? 100 is definitely yours. 100 is definitely yours. It's the other 100 that we don't know what to do with.
Third person keep it.
Give it to charity.
So,
Give it to
but
charity.
that's not justice. We want to try to give it back to the person who owns it, who was the owner. Justice is, give it to charity is a nice thing. If they both agree, fine. But they both want it. So by giving it a charity, not doing justice. So now what do we do with the third one? So what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says the third one, leave it in court. Court should seize it, and until Elijah comes, or until one can bring evidence, or the swindler, confesses, it's going to stay in the court. Okay. Can you see the contradiction here?
Yeah.
This last $100, who's in possession of it?
Court.
Right before the court, the Bailey, right? Any of the 2 people who belong to originally, are they in possession of it? No, they're not in possession. So nobody has possession of it. None of the claimants have possession of it. And what does the Mishnah say? The court should seize it. Oh, 1 second. How is that different from the boat, who didn't have any nobody had possession of the boat, and the Mishnah said, leave it alone. Don't possess it. So you understand the question? We have 2 Mishnahs. One says, no possessors, leave it alone. Court doesn't get involved. And here it says, no, court's going to grab this $100 and keep it till Elijah the prophet comes. Now the Talmud has to, has to sort of drive these two Mishnahs, because you can't have one Mishnah arguing with another Mishnah. I mean, it's a contradiction. What's the law?
What is in the water? The other one is not in the
One's either in the water, or it's in the swamp, or it's on the. It could be in the water, could be not in the water. Yeah.
It's a third person.
Huh?
It's a third person.
You mean that the person who's holding the money? Bailey's holding, but he's not involved. It's definitely not his money. He doesn't get anything. But you're right. You're onto something. What's that? For now, we have to now exercise. We have to learn and implement another rule, another law. That's in text 13. Text 13.
The third person is the big late.
Right. Page 122. It's very short here.
So he's got an obligation.
1 second. It is as if both of them are holding the money. What the Rosh says here is not a contradiction, because in the case of the Bailey, it's not that you and you are not in possession of the money, of the last $100. On the contrary, it's like both of you are possessing the money. Why? Since the Bailey was holding possession of the question ownership was born, is holding the money on the strength of their authorization, and his hand is legally regarded as extension of their hands. There is a legal term in halacha, shlucho shel adam k'moisai. If I make an agent,
duty.
different. If I make you as an agent to do something, your hand becomes my hand. So, for example, I can make you as an agent to betroth a woman, even though I have to do it. When I say become my shliach to do it, you become like me. One famous example of that is the bris. It's the mitzvah for the father to circumcise the child, right? I didn't circumcise my children. What do? I take the knife, I give it to the mohel, and I said, you are my shliach. So when the mohel does it, it's like I do it. His hand is called yodei arichta, my extended hand. Okay. So since these two people, you two gave me the money, I am your shliach, your agent to hold the money for you. So I become your extended hand. So it's not that nobody is in possession of this $100. You're both in possession of this $100. And therefore, it's not a case of the boat, but it's similar to the case of two people coming into court, both holding the talis. What's the question now?
What do you do?
So, right, what do you do? What's the question? What's the contradiction here? So listen up. What do we say in the Mishnah? Two people are in possession. What's the law? Split it. What do we say here? We've concluded, let's say concluded that these two people are holding it because I am the extension of their hand. What do we say? We don't say split it. What do we say? That last $100 in question, keep it until Elijah comes. So it's a contradiction again, right? So originally we thought it's in the case of no possessors, right? If that's the case, then why do we hold it? The boat we didn't hold. Now we're saying it's a case of two possessors. Both of them are holding. It's like both of them are holding. If that's the case, it's like the Mishnah. It should be split it. Split the last $50, the last $100, 50-50, like you did the talis. So here the Gemara answers text 14. No, it's a totally different rationale. Why? Because in that case of the disputed deposits with the Bailey, there is certainly a swindler. Who does last $100 belong to? Well, either you or you, right? Doesn't belong to both of you. It's impossible. It's definitely not fair, but I don't know who. Right, but who cheated them? Right, the other person cheated them. There's definitely a swindler here. One of these two people gave 100 and now is claiming he gave 200. It's impossible that they're both right. However, when two people come into court and said, I found this, I picked it up first, is there a possibility that they both think they picked it up first, or they both did pick it up at the same time?
Yes.
Yes, it's possible. It's possible
Yeah.
They both thought, ran over to it, they picked up at the same time. One thinks they picked it up first, the other one thinks they picked it up first. There's no swindler.
In this case,
Why?
because there's a swindler,
Why?
because the person knows what they put into an
No,
envelope.
no, not the envelope, not the envelope. In the case that we're coming in with the coat, the katalis.
That I understand.
It's very possible that there's no swindler here. Nobody's trying to steal money from the other. It's an honest mistake. I thought I grabbed it first. You thought you grabbed it first. So in that case, when there's in the top, and that's why it's just the genius. That's why the Mishnah says one claims I found it, the other one says I found it. Why doesn't the Mishnah say I inherited it? The other one says I bought it? Because then there would be a swindler. If two people said they inherited it, it would be a swindler. This Mishnah is specifically telling us one says I found it, the other one says I found it, because it only applies to a case where there is possibility that there's no swindler. Then you say split this last $50 or the talus. But in the case of the bailee, since one of them is for sure a swindler who's going to gain $50 off of swindling a friend, we say no, we're not doing that. We're not rewarding a swindler, and therefore, even though they're both considered like they're both possessing it, holding on to it, but last $100 is going to stay in court because there's a swindler. So now it sort of explains why the Mishnah says they're both claiming they found it. Specifically, they found it. There's a lot more that goes into the Mishnah of why they have to swear that they don't own less than a half. Why shouldn't they swear, all thing is mine, the whole thing is mine? Because if you make both of them swear the whole thing is mine, what happens? One of them is swearing falsely. You're making one swear falsely, maybe inadvertently, but maybe he thinks it's not his. See, these two people, you can make them swear. Yeah, no problem. Because I mean, people have a fear of swearing falsely. Here, both of them think they're swearing truthfully, and one of them will be swearing falsely. And that's what's the shabua? What's the oath? That I don't own less than half of it. Being it's very possible I picked it up together with the other person. So this sort of explains sort of the preciseness of the Talmud, of why the Mishnah says it the way it says it, and we learn so many laws from it. And that's what the Talmud does. The Talmud took one Mishnah, found the source of it, chazaka, possession, then inferred from it, since here we're talking about two people possessing it, holding a talus, some crazy case, because the Mishnah is telling us only if two people are holding it. One person's holding it, it's a different case. Nobody's holding it, it's a different case. And the Mishnah says specifically he found it, because only if in a case where one person may not be a swindler, only then do you split it. There are many other things we learn from this Mishnah, we just don't have time. But this Mishnah, the Talmud of this Mishnah goes on for pages. And the same style here, but continues to use the same logic. Yeah. So we'll conclude here because we're already 15 minutes over. But you just look at text page 123 and figure 3.5. It sort of clarifies this in a chart. Right? Two people claim a property, but neither litigant has witnesses or other definitive proof supporting their claim. So the question is, how many litigants are currently in possession of the property? If it's one, go down there. Well, it remains with the possessor. If it's two, well, depends. Is one of them certainly lying? If yes, it remains in trust. If no, the property is divided. And if nobody has possession of it, the court does not concern itself with the case. Okay, next week I think next week is a fascinating class. It's about halacha. How we go from this Talmud Mishnah style of learning to the great halachics like Maimonides, Nachmanides, and their methods of learning and the role they played in Jewish oral tradition. And it's fascinating. We're going to go through some really amazing halachic logic and scenarios and try to get to the bottom of how we know how to figure out Jewish law. Okay, let's do it now. There we go. Okay, let's give our mind a rest. Wishing you all a good night. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you.